Norse mythology is the most legendary of world mythologies. One of history's most extraordinary and intriguing mythologies is undoubtedly Norse mythology. Get ready to learn about all the gods of Norse mythology, including Odin, Thor, and Loki, supernatural creatures such as giants and dwarves, the heroes Ragnar Lodbrok and his sons, the creation stories, the 9 realms, the adventures of the gods, and the end of all things, Ragnarok. There are many gods and goddesses in Norse mythology. Before moving on to the mythological stories, let's start by talking about Odin, Thor, Loki, Balder, Njord, Frey, Freyja, Tyr, and Heimdall, the most important gods and goddesses of Norse mythology. In Norse mythology, Odin is the greatest of all gods and the father of all, as most of us know. He was the wisest of the gods, and all the gods consulted him on any matter. He lost an eye to drink the water of wisdom from the well of the giant Mimir. In the paintings, he is depicted as an old man, with one eye closed, holding a shield in one hand and a spear in the other. Odin also had 2 wolves named Geri and Freki, and 2 ravens named Hugin and Munin. The names of the ravens meant thought and memory. Odin owed much of his wisdom to these ravens. Every day the ravens flew to many corners of the universe and returned at dinner to tell Odin what they had seen, so that he would be aware of what was happening. For this reason, Odin is also known as the god of ravens. In Asgard, where he also lived, he could see everything that happened in the realms from his great throne, Hlidskjalf, and he could travel anywhere he wanted thanks to Sleipnir, the fastest horse in the universe with 8 legs. He could also hit everything he aimed at with his spear, Gungnir. One day, Odin hung himself from the world tree Yggdrasil for wisdom and stayed there for 9 nights. His body was pierced with a spear and he was mortally wounded. Here, the light of life slowly faded. Just as he was about to die, his sacrifice paid off. The runes revealed themselves below. Odin realized what the runes were and their power. Then the rope broke and he fell from the tree. Thanks to the runes, he knew magic and had the universe in his hand. Odin's dedication to wisdom also affected believers around the world. In sacred places, some people were wounded with a spear and hung from a tree as an offering to Odin. The greatest god after Odin is Thor, the god of thunder. He is the son of Odin. He protected people's lives and property from all evil in Midgard, so in the world. Changes in the weather and climate were thanks to him. He also directed the rain. But thunder and lightning were the most special powers of Thor, who was always at war with the giants. He also had a chariot with lightning bolts coming out of its wheels as he drove. 2 goats pulled the chariot. Thor would eat these goats from time to time and then bring them back to life from their bones and skins. On Earth, Thor lived in the great Bilskirnir palace with 540 rooms. In this palace, he kept valuable things. The most important of these items was his hammer, Mjolnir, forged by dwarves. He would take this hammer with him whenever he had to go to war with giants. He could also make his hammer as big or small as possible. When he swung it in the air, it always found its target and returned. He used his iron glove to hold the hammer more comfortably. He also had a power belt around his waist. This belt increased his strength many times over. Thor strengthened the community of gods, the Aesir, as they are called in mythology. Without him, the Aesir would have been powerless against the giants. When he fought the giants, he could make the mountains tremble and set the earth on fire. He was tall, strong, handsome, and noble. He also had red hair and a beard. There are many mythological stories about Thor, which we will talk about in a moment. In the Marvel Universe, Loki is portrayed as Thor's half-brother, but this is fiction. Originally the son of the mythological frost giant Farbauti, Loki helped Odin in his war against the frost giants and helped him win the war. Thus, Odin declared Loki his blood brother and placed him on the side of the Aesir gods. Loki was handsome, logical, persuasive, cunning, sneaky, and malicious. Because of his evil deeds, he sometimes had to do good in return. Sometimes he even helped other gods. However, he was still secretly hostile to the Aesir and tried to make friends with the giants. It was he who planned the death of Odin's son Balder, but his children would do the real evil. These children were Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel. Fenrir was a ravenous wolf, Jormungandr a great snake that spewed poison. Hel was a terrible witch. Loki could walk in the sky with his flying shoes and shapeshift into the form of other people or animals. But his real weapon was his mind. Even Odin was no match for his cunning. He both backed Thor and betrayed him whenever he could. To humans, he was a sly god, father of monsters, and creator of troubles. When Ragnarok comes, the end of all things, Loki and his children will take their place and stand against Asgard and its gods. I will talk more about Ragnarok and Loki's children in a moment. Balder, another son of Odin, was the god of purity, beauty, innocence, and peace. His skin was so bright and fair that it radiated from his body. Balder was said to be the most handsome of the gods. He was also wise, kind, tolerant, and just, so much so that his judgment could not be doubted. Although he was killed by his brother Hod in Loki's plot, he would come back to life after the world's destruction. We will examine Balder's death separately. I have already mentioned that the community of gods is called the Aesir. The gods of the Aesir live with Odin in Asgard. After the Aesir, there is another group of gods. These gods live in Vanaheim and are called Vanir. In ancient times, the Aesir and Vanir were at war, but then they signed a peace treaty by exchanging prisoners. The Aesir gave Honir as a prisoner. Vanir sent Njord to Asgard as a prisoner. From then on, Njord was seen as a god of the Aesir and became one of the most prominent gods. Njord directed the wind and ruled the sea and fire. He distributed wealth to people who fished in the sea and was much remembered by the people. He was even painted on ships. He was also known as the child of Vanir, the god of Vanir, and the spotless god. Frey was Njord's son, and Freyja was his daughter. Frey was very handsome, loftier, and more courageous than his father. He ruled the weather and agriculture. Prosperity, joy, and peace were in his hands. Like his father, he was once the god of Vanir. He was also called the god of the seasons and the giver of existence. He was the ruler of Alfheim, one of the 9 realms where the light elves lived. He had a ship that could travel on land and sea and carry in his pocket at will. Frey was much worshipped in Scandinavia, especially in Sweden. His sister Freyja came to Asgard later and joined the Aesir. Freyja drove a chariot pulled by 2 cats and lived in Folkvang. Half of the heroes who lost their lives in battle belonged to her, and she had the right to choose who she wanted. She would take these heroes with her to Folkvang. People saw her as the goddess of love because she had an important place in love relationships. Born to the daughter of Odin and Hymir the giant, the god Tyr was brave and daring. He was known as the god of war. People would cry out his name in battle. He would grant them heroism and courage. He relished conflict and would do nothing to bring peace. Those who led in battle were called Tyr's kin. Tyr was also known for babysitting Fenrir the wolf, one of Loki's children. However, one day, Fenrir bit Tyr's right hand and tore it off in a bet. For this reason, it was said that Tyr had no right hand. We will touch on this story as well. One of the main gods of Norse mythology was Heimdall. Considered supreme and holy, Heimdall bore the title of the White God. He had the whitest skin of the gods. One day, he was miraculously born of 9 virgin giants. Some considered him the son of Odin. His teeth were of emerald or gold. He could see and hear what was happening in all the realms, day and night. He lived near Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, and protected it from giants. He had a huge horn called the Gjala horn. When he blew it, its sound could be heard in all the realms. Let's continue with Norse mythology. looking at supernatural creatures such as Norns, spirits, Valkyries, giants, and dwarves. After gods and goddesses, the most important supernatural beings are the Norns, the goddesses of fate. 3 names stand out among the Norns. These are Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld. These 3 Norns nourished the world tree with the water they drew from the sacred well and prevented it from rotting. The Norns controlled the fate not only of humans, but also of the gods of the Aesir and the immutable laws of the universe. When children were born, they were brought before the Norns, and their fate was decided. They could live no longer than they were allowed to. There were both good and evil Norns. Other supernatural beings similar to the Norns are the Hamingja, so friendly spirits, and the Fylgja, so guardian spirits. Friendly spirits were invisible supernatural beings who were companions to humans. Everyone had a friendly spirit that brought them good luck. When a man risked his life for another, he could borrow the friendly spirit of the one he was risking. Usually, when friendly spirits appeared to people, they appeared like animals in their sleep. Guardian spirits appeared as animals walking in front of or behind people. Each person could have 1 or more guardian spirits, which were assigned according to their personality. Strong leaders had a guardian spirit in the form of a bear or a bull, while cunning people had one in the form of a fox. Friendly and guardian spirits were not worshipped or prayed to. These spirits were believed to exist even after the conversion to Christianity. The Valkyries are Odin's auxiliary warriors, beautiful young maidens adorned with helmets and armed with weapons. When a hero had to die, Odin would call upon them, and the Valkyries would take the hero to Valhalla. Victory and death in battle were their domain. They could fly through the air or float on water. In Valhalla, they served drinks to the heroes. When the end of the world, Ragnarok, came, and they would fight alongside Odin with the heroes they had taken to Valhalla. Giants, the worst enemies of the Aesir and humanity, were savage and crude creatures, but they were not always malicious. At times, they also did good deeds. The giants had many animals, including herds of cattle, bulls with golden horns, horses, and dogs. They liked the darkness and dark work. If daylight fell on a giant, he would suddenly turn to stone. Sometimes, they even fought among themselves. Even after the conversion to Christianity, giants were believed to exist. Giants were now thought to be enemies of God and the churches. In pagan times, they were most hostile to Odin and Thor. They lived in Jotunheim, the world of giants, or the mountains near human settlements. Dwarves and dark elves, with no clear distinction between them, lived deep in the earth or the great rocks and mounds. Dwarves were short and ugly creatures. Dark elves were blacker than pitch. The ruler of the dwarves was Motsognir. He was called the master of all dwarves. The greatest name after him was Durin. Brok and Dvalin, whom Odin appointed to guard the treasure in the firmament, were also dwarves. There were 4 more dwarves named North, South, East, and West. The dwarves' main occupation was blacksmithing. They made the best weapons and precious jewels that caught the eye. The dwarf Eitri made Thor's hammer and many other weapons of the gods. But dwarves disliked both gods and men. They were not very willing to serve them. If they were forced to work too hard, they could jinx their creations with magic. According to Norse mythology, night and day are gods from the race of giants. Not or Night, the daughter of the giant Norvi, was a dark and black-skinned girl. One day, Not married Delling, one of the Aesir gods. She had a son named Dag from this marriage, meaning day. This child was fair-skinned and radiant. Odin, the father of all, gave Night and his son Day 2 horses and 2 chariots, later placed them in the sky. Night and day revolved around the earth, alternating here and there. Thus, day and night, as we know them, came into being. Let us continue with the story of Ragnar Lodbrok and his sons, which is both historical and mythological. In Gotland, there lived a little girl named Thora. Her noble father gave her a small meadow snake as a gift. Thora fed this snake for years, and in time, the snake became too big to fit in a big room. The snake had become dangerous. Her father promised to give his daughter in marriage and a fortune to anyone who could kill the snake. But everyone was afraid of the snake. Sigurd, king of Denmark, had a son named Ragnar. Ragnar was tall and handsome. From an early age, he had shown bravery. When he heard Thora's father's proposal, he set out for Gotland. Before he met the snake, he soaked his clothes in mud to make them rough and put them on. Then he went to the snake and thrust his spear into it. The venom gushing of the snake splashed on Ragnar's clothes, which were covered with mud but could not wound him. Ragnar killed the snake and married Thora. He had 2 sons with Thora, Eric and Agnar. Soon after, Thora died. The death of his wife saddened Ragnar so much that he left the kingdom behind and went from war to war. One summer day he arrived in Spangereid, Norway. Deciding to rest for a while, Ragnar sent his bakers to the coast to bake bread. The bakers came across a farm belonging to 2 men, Aki and Grima. These were the men who had killed King Heimer and taken his stepdaughter Aslaug hostage. The bakers asked Aslaug to help them bake the bread. Later, Aslaug wanted to go into the river to bathe. But this was forbidden by Grima. Because Aslaug was so beautiful, Grima feared this beauty would be discovered. When Aslaug entered the river, the bakers, astonished by his great beauty, burned all the bread. When they returned, Ragnar asked why the bakers were incompetent and learned what a beautiful woman Aslaug was. He sent his men to summon her to his presence, but he also wanted to test Aslaug's intelligence. So he asked her to come neither clothed nor unclothed, neither hungry nor full, neither alone nor with anyone else. So Aslaug took off all his clothes, wrapped a fishing net around him, and wrapped his long hair around his body like a garment. Then he bit off a piece of leek and took a dog. When Ragnar saw Aslaug, he was impressed by her beauty and intelligence and wanted to marry her. Ragnar was about to go on a campaign. Aslaug, therefore, made a condition to Ragnar. If he did not change his mind at the end of the campaign and came back to him, he would marry her. After a season, Ragnar kept his promise and returned to Aslaug. He took her back to his kingdom and they got married there. They had sons from this marriage: Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn the Iron Face, Hvitserk, and Ragnvald. Ivar could not walk because his legs had cartilage instead of bone, but he was the smartest. His brothers followed his advice. Ragnvald died at an early age during a raid. At that time, a king named Eystein ruled Sweden. King Eystein and Ragnar Lodbrok were very good friends. One day, Ragnar attended a banquet that Eystein had organized. Eystein's daughter was pouring drinks for the kings. Ragnar's friends persuaded him to take the king's daughter and leave Aslaug. King Eystein approved of this union. It was agreed that Ragnar would return to Sweden later to marry the princess. Ragnar did not want his wife Aslaug to know about this, but 3 birds told the secret to Aslaug. Aslaug scolded Ragnar when he came home. She also prophesied that she would soon give birth to a child, and that the child would have the image of a snake in its eye, meaning that it was a descendant of her father, King Sigurd. Aslaug's prophecy proved true when the child was born, and their newborn son Sigurd was snake-eyed. Ragnar remained loyal to Aslaug and declared he would not marry King Eystein's daughter. King Eystein was furious. From then on, he and Ragnar became enemies. Ragnar's eldest sons, Eric and Agnar, gathered an army on the Swedish border and fought King Eystein. After the defeat, Agnar died in battle. Eric did not want to be indebted to Eystein, so he chose to be killed by jumping on a spear stuck in the ground. A messenger from the king brought Eric's ring to Aslaug and told him of his death. Vowing revenge, Aslaug encouraged his sons, and they sailed with an army to Sweden. Here, they fought Eystein and won the battle, killing the king. After that, Ragnar's sons continued to fight and gain fame by going south. In the meantime, Ragnar lived quietly at home. Soon he heard of his son's glory, and, so as not to be outdone by them, he ordered the building of 2 huge merchant ships. These ships were to be so large that they could carry his entire army overseas to England. Aslog told Ragnar to divide his army into more ships so he could land more safely, but Ragnar would not listen to his wife. So Aslog gave Ragnar a shirt to protect him from all attacks, just in case, and Ragnar set sail. When they reached England, both of Ragnar's ships ran aground. There was no chance of turning back now. Aelle, king of Northumbria in England, gathered a huge army when he heard about this invasion and managed to defeat Ragnar because he was outnumbered. Ragnar was first taken prisoner and then thrown into a well full of snakes by the king's order. Ragnar was protected from snake bites by the shirt given to him by his wife Aslaug. When the shirt was removed from his back, Ragnar succumbed to the poison of the snakes. Before he died, he said, "How the little piglets will growl when they learn of the pig's suffering." Ragnar's sons were back in Denmark at that time. King Aelle sent messengers to his sons to tell them of Ragnar's death. She told the messengers to look carefully to see who would react and how. The messengers found Ivar sitting on the throne. Meanwhile, Fitzurk and Sigurd were playing chess. Bjorn was busy shaping a spear. When the messengers brought the news of Ragnar's death, Bjorn broke the spear in 2. Fitzurk smashed the chess piece in his hand. Sigurd, knife in hand, sliced his finger to the bone. And Ivar began to interrogate the envoys in cold blood. When the envoys returned, King Aelle heard all this and expressed his concern, saying, "Ivar is the only one we should fear, no one else." As all the brothers began to plot revenge, Ivar suggested that they should not go down this path and accept the bale Aelle would offer. The other brothers did not listen to Ivar, took him with them, and went to England with a whole army. Ivar did not take part in this war. His brothers had lost the war. Ivar approached King Aelle and asked her to bail out his father for a piece of land as big as an ox hide could enclose. Aelle accepted the offer, which she found funny and reasonable, but Ivar was cunning. He cut the ox hide into strips and surrounded a large piece of land with these strips. He then built a house here and made it sheltered. He called this place Lundunaborg, now called London. Ivar promised not to fight against King Aelle, but he managed to persuade the people in the king's service to join his side over time. Thus, he now had great power in England. Returning to Scandinavia, Ivar told his brothers they could now raise an army. The brothers did as Ivar said and sailed to England with a great army. This time, they were much stronger when they faced Aelle. Aelle's servants had already broken their oath of loyalty. After an overwhelmingly superior battle, King Aelle was taken prisoner. On Ivar's orders, a blood eagle was carved on his back, which was how Aelle died. Ivar allowed his brothers to rule Ragnar's kingdom. He took England and ruled there until his death. According to Norse mythology, what existed before the beginning and how were the realms created afterward? Before the beginning, there was nothing. There was no earth, no sky, no stars. Only a realm of mist and of fire burned. In the north was Niflheim, dark and colder than cold, the land of mists. And to the south was Muspel, the land of fire where everything burned. At the edge of the flames in Muspel is Surtur, who existed before the gods. He is always there, waiting with his flaming sword in his hand. At the end of the world, at Ragnarok, it is said that Surtur will leave his place only then. He will leave with his flaming sword and set the realm of the gods on fire. There was a huge gap between Muspel and Niflheim called Ginnungagap. The misty rivers of Niflheim flowed into it, and in the vast space between them, the rivers solidified into ice. Until, in the middle of this void, they met the sparking lava of Muspel. The ice melted at Ginnungagap, where ice and fire met, and life manifested in the melting waters. It was neither male nor female. It was Ymir, the ancestor of the giants, with his gigantic body. He was not the only one, but also a hornless cow. The cow first licked a block of ice to feed and then gave milk. The giant Ymir fed on this milk and grew. From the ice mold, the cow licked, A man's hair appeared on the first day, a man's head on the second day, and a man's entire form on the third day. This man was Buri, the ancestor of the gods. Ymir was asleep at this time and gave birth while slept. A female and a male giant were born under his left arm, and a six-headed giant was born between his legs. All the giants that would be born later were descended from these children of Ymir. Buri, the ancestor of the gods, took one of these giants as his wife, and they had a son named Bor. Bor married the giantess Bestla, and they had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. As Odin, Vili, and Ve grew up, they realized they were trapped in the space between Muspel and Niflheim. The 3 brothers discussed life, the future, and their imagined universe. Eventually they decided to create a world with seas, trees, land, and sky. But to do this, Ymir the giant had to die. Because there was no other way to create realms, Ymir's death was the beginning of everything and made all life possible. So much blood flowed from Ymir that all the giants drowned in the flood of blood except his grandson Bergelmir and his wife. Odin and his brothers created the earth from Ymir's flesh, mountains and slopes from his bones, sand and stones from his teeth, and seas from his blood. The stars in the sky were Muspel's sparks. The world they created was flat and surrounded by seas, and around it now lived giants. To keep the giants away, Odin and his brothers built a wall in the middle of the world from Ymir's eyelashes and called it Midgard. Midgard had become a wonderful living place with clean soil and clear waters, but there was no one living. Odin, Vili, and Ve thought for a while to create creatures to live in this land. Finally, they planted 2 pieces of driftwood that had washed up on the shore in the sand. Odin breathed life into these logs. Vili gave them will, reason, and ideas. Ve carved the logs and gave them the shape of human beings. He carved male and female organs into one and the other. Then, because these people were naked, the gods created clothes for them. They called the man Ask and the woman Embla. Ask and Embla were the ancestors of all humanity who were born and would be born. These people lived safely in Midgard. Odin was the father of all because he breathed life into our ancestors, and all the gods to be born were his descendants. So, what was the World Tree, and where were the 9 realms? Yggdrasil, an ash tree, is the most perfect, beautiful, and largest tree. Its branches reach far into the sky, and its roots reach into 3 different realms and are fed by 3 different wells. The deepest root goes to the well in Niflheim, which existed before everything. The second root goes to Jotunheim, the land of the frost giants, and the third to Asgard, the land of the gods. The branches of Yggdrasil, the World Tree, extend to 9 realms and connect them all. These 9 realms are Asgard, home of Odin, the protector of the 9 realms, and the gods of the Aesir. Alfheim, home to the elves of light, as bright as the sun and as beautiful as the stars. Nidavellir, the land of dark elves and dwarves, also known as Svartalfheim, where unique inventions are made. Midgard, the world of men and women, our home. Jotunheim, the cold land inhabited by frost giants. Vanaheim is where the Vanir gods rule. Niflheim, the land of dark mists that existed before everything else. Muspel, the place of fire and Surtur, which also existed long ago. And Hel, named after its ruler, where those who do not die valiantly go, is of the 9 realms. Let us begin the first adventure by telling how Odin lost an eye. A root of the World Tree reaches Mimir's well in Jotunheim. The wise Mimir is the keeper of this well and knows many things. The well is the source of his wisdom, and every morning he drinks from it with a horn he calls the Gjallarhorn. One day, in his quest for wisdom, Odin risks his life to travel to the land of giants to reach Mimir. He tells Mimir that he wants to sip water from the well. Mimir does not allow Odin. Odin says he is related to the giants, but this is not enough to convince Mimir. Finally, he asks Mimir what he wants in exchange for a sip of water. Mimir asks Odin to put his eye in the well. Odin has traveled such dangerous paths that he cannot refuse this request. For the sake of wisdom, he gouges out an eye and drops it into the well. Then he takes a sip of water with Mimir's Gjallar horn. Suddenly, he sees more with one eye than both, and wisdom spreads throughout his body. Odin now has one eye in the well. Some time passes, and war breaks out between the Aesir and Vanir. When they make peace, Odin gives the god Hoenir to Vanir and sends Mimir as an advisor. Thanks to Mimir, Hoenir acts like a wise king and benefits a lot from him. The Vanir gods, disturbed by this, cut off Mimir's head and send it to Odin. Odin was furious because he had benefited so much from Mimir. He rubs Mimir's head with herbs to prevent it from rotting and casts spells. Soon, it works. Mimir's head opens its eyes and begins to speak, so Odin continues to make use of him. He gives Mimir's horn to Heimdall. Heimdall will blow this horn when Ragnarok comes, and the gods can hear its sound wherever they are. Let's continue by telling the story of Loki's children, who would be the scourge of the gods. Everyone wanted to love Loki because he was handsome and cunning, but he was untrustworthy and sneaky. One day in Asgard, he married a woman named Sigyn. Soon they had sons named Narfi and Vali. But he kept disappearing and leaving his wife alone. One day, Odin dreamt that Loki had 3 children with the frost giant Angerboda, and when he asked Loki about it, he could not deny it. By the time he disappeared, Loki had made 3 more children with Angerboda. Odin realized at that moment that these children would be the greatest enemies of the gods in Ragnarok. Odin, Tyr, and Thor traveled quickly to the giant realm of Jotunheim to bring Loki's children to Asgard and put them under control. After dealing with several obstacles, they came across Angerboda and her children. They were almost speechless when they saw what the children looked like. They immediately tied up the children and set off again for Asgard. 3 days he had passed on the way back from Jotunheim when Thor stopped momentarily and thought, why was no one intervening to stop them from taking the children away? Not even the children's mother had said anything, and it was as if they wanted them taken away from this land. Despite this thought, Thor continued to take the children to Asgard. Loki's first child was a serpent named Jormungandr. During their travels, this serpent grew and grew and grew, becoming bigger than a tree. Odin knew that this serpent would grow even bigger, so he decided to release it into Midgard, the sea surrounding our Earth, because he had seen it in a dream. Then the serpent grew so big that it surrounded the Earth. Then Odin looked at Loki's daughter. Her right half was beautiful, while the left half looked like a rotting corpse. He asked her name and learned that it was Hel. Odin saw no fear in her, and to fulfill his dream, he made her ruler of the deepest, darkest of dark places, the land of Hel. She would now be the ruler of all the unworthy dead. Only those who died bravely in battle would go to Valhalla. Odin took care of 2 children. One was under the sea, the other under the earth. But what to do with the third? Loki's third child was a wolf. His name was Fenrir. He was growing very fast and becoming more frightening every day. All the gods feared him, but only Tyr was not afraid of him and fed and loved him. The gods decided that Fenrir must now be bound. They tricked him with the promise of a show of strength and bound him in chains. Fenrir managed to tear the chain off in one fell swoop and showed the gods his strength. Fenrir asked Tyr if the gods would test me again, and Tyr said, "I bet my right hand that they will." This time, the gods forged a much stronger chain. If you break this chain, all the glory and fame is yours. You will be stronger than all the gods and giants. They tricked him again. Then Fenrir was chained. This time, he seemed unable to break the chain. He forced and forced, finally broke the chain, so pieces of it splattered everywhere. The gods were getting scared. So, Odin decided to have the dwarves build a new chain that would cost a fortune. The dwarves skillfully crafted the most powerful chain in all the realms, unprecedented. This chain, called Gleipnir, looked like a ribbon of silk. It was smooth and soft. The gods told Fenrir that Gleipnir was the strongest chain in all the realms and that he could not break it. At first, Fenrir saw the chain as a simple ribbon, but this time he sensed a betrayal. He was afraid that the gods would bind him forever. Before, he told the gods that he would not bind himself for such a simple thing, but the gods claimed that Fenrir was afraid. Fenrir made a condition and said to the gods, "Then let one of you put your hand in my mouth if I break the chain, or if I cannot break it and set me your free, I will not bite the one who puts his hand in." The gods looked at each other. Fenrir had to be persuaded to be bound. Tyr stepped forward and said, "I will do it." Tyr put his right hand over Fenrir's mouth, and they tied Gleipnir to the wolf. Fenrir tried once, tried twice, and marveled at how the chain, which looked like a simple ribbon, bound him. When the gods were sure that the chain would not break, they began to laugh. Fenrir realized that he would now be bound. He locked eyes with Tyr and bit off Tyr's hand. He told Odin that he was a liar, had been a friend to the gods, and now he would be an enemy. He swore that he would kill Odin at the end of it all. With Fenrir bound, all of Loki's children were under control. So, what happened on Thor's journey to the land of the giants? Thialfi and his sister Roskva lived with their family on a farm near the land of giants. But one day, Thor and Loki pulled up to this farm in a cart by 2 giant goats. Thor said they would stay here before their journey to the land of giants. Thor slaughtered his goats for dinner that night and said everyone could eat. Loki was being sneaky again. He whispered to Thialfi that he could be as strong as Thor if he ate the marrow from the goat's bones. Thor ordered that they could eat as much of the meat as they wanted, but the goat's skins and bones must never be harmed, and the bones must be put inside the skins. Thialfi broke one of the bones and ate the marrow, hoping to be as strong as Thor. Then he put the bone deep inside the skin and hid it without Thor knowing. In the morning, Thor raised his hammer to resurrect the goats and called for them to return in one piece. The goats came to life, but one was stumbling. Then he realized that one of the goats had a broken leg. He turned to the people who lived on the farm and asked who had done this. Otherwise, he would punish them all. Thialfi said it was himself, without naming him, and asked him not to harm his family, offering to be Thor's servant for the rest of his life. His sister Roskva said, "If you take him, take me too." Thor then told Roskva to stay with him until the wounded goat was healed. Thialfi would also enter the land of giants with Thor and Loki, and when they returned, they would all go to Asgard together. The 3 comrades entered Jotunheim, heading east. When it got cold, they decided to rest. Looking for shelter, they found a strange house with no windows, one large room, and not even a door. They went inside and lay down to rest. An hour had passed when a great noise awakened them, and the ground was shaking. It sounded like a roar. The noise and the shaking did not stop until dawn. Thor went out of the house when it was light and looked for the noise source. He went up a hill and saw a huge giant he had ever seen. Thor looked like a tiny insect next to the giant. He immediately grabbed his hammer and his power belt. Meanwhile, the giant opened his eyes and bowed. The giant did not look threatening at all. He told Thor that he had lost one glove and wanted to find it, and he had the other one in his hand. He looked left and right and saw his glove on the ground. Then he realized there was something inside the glove. He shook it off, and Loki and Thialfi fell out. So they realized that what they had entered for shelter at night was not the house but the giant's glove. The giant named Skrymir told the 3 companions that they could travel together and that he would feed them. They agreed. They spent that day together. Then, at night, they camped somewhere. The giant said he would lie down and sleep, and that the food was in his bag, and they could take it and eat. After the giant fell asleep, Thor wanted to take the provisions from the bag, because they were hungry, but he could not untie the bag, despite all his strength. The big tie was like iron. Then he wanted to hit the giant with his hammer and wake him, but the giant would not wake. He kept snoring and shaking the ground. The blows of the hammer felt like a tree leaf hitting him. In the morning, the giant woke up. He slept well. Thor and his companions were sleepless and hungry. From now on, they and the giant would part ways. Thor, Loki, and Thialfi continued walking eastward through Jotunheim. They saw a castle in the distance and walked towards it, but they could not seem to reach it. It didn't seem to get bigger or smaller. It always seemed to be the same distance away. After traveling for days, they reached the castle. Loki said this was Utgard, the home of giants. The gate alone was much higher than the trees. They all went in together and walked to the hall. The giants were sitting there with their king. Thor called out and greeted them all. When the giant king saw the guests, he immediately recognized Thor and Loki and said, "Only the gifted can enter Utgard." He then asked the three about their abilities. Loki said he could eat very fast. Then they competed with a giant. Although they both ate very fast, they finished at the same time. But the giant had eaten the bones. That's why Loki lost the race. When Thialfi was asked about his talent, he said, "I can run faster than anyone else." They left the castle, and he raced with the skinniest and smallest of the giants. The giants deemed him worthy. Then they started the race. Thialfi ran faster than ever, but the skinny giant had already won the race before he was halfway there. The running race was repeated 3 times with a storm raging behind Thialfi as he ran, but he never won a race. This made the giants very happy because 2 guests had lost the competition. Now it was Thor's turn. The giants knew him well and knew he had abilities. They asked Thor what he could do. Thor said he could drink all the drinks more than anyone else. One of the giants stepped forward and brought the drinking horn. The horn was for a giant, and it was very big. Even the giants could hardly drink from it in one drink. But Thor was confident, and he drank from the horn. He drank until he was out of breath. He expected to have finished the drink, but he choked. Then he looked at the horn, which was still full. The giants allowed him 3 sips, but Thor never finished the drink. Then the giants began to make fun of Thor and offered him another race. They asked if he could lift a giant cat. This giant cat was even bigger than Thor. Thor was sure he could lift the cat, but he could not. He could only lift the cat's paw. Again, the giants mocked him. This time, Thor offered to wrestle a giant. The giants refused because they thought wrestling Thor, who could not even lift a cat, was ridiculous. They told Thor that he could only wrestle an old woman giant. The old giant looked as if he would collapse in a gust of wind. Thor held on well, but even so, and the old giant was able to knock him down. So Thor, Loki, and Thialfi were all defeated by giants. They had never tasted defeat in their realm before. Then, the king of the giants began to confess. He was Skrymir, the first giant they met when they entered Jotunheim. He had changed his appearance. The first night, he pretended to sleep and tied his ration bag with iron. That is why they went hungry that night. It was futile for Thor to try to wake him up by hitting him with a hammer, because the giant had put an invisible mountain between him and the hammer. Otherwise, even a small blow from Thor's hammer could easily kill the giant. The giant Loki was competing with for the fastest meal was actually fire, burning all the food. That's why his bones were destroyed. This was also an illusion. The giant Thialfi was competing against was thought. No one could compete with Thialfi. He was indeed faster than everyone, but nothing could be faster than thought. The horn that Thor drank from was connected to the sea. As he drank, it multiplied with the water from the sea. Thor drank so much that the level of the sea was halfway down. The cat he was trying to lift was Jormungandr, the giant serpent that circled the earth. No one could ever lift it, but Thor managed to lift a knuckle and the earth shook. The old giant he wrestled was Old Age. No one could defeat Old Age, because one day everyone would grow old and become a skinny human, and yet Thor fought back so well. So it was all an illusion, and the giants had never seen anyone with such skill until that night. One of the most important stories of Norse mythology is the death of Balder. Balder, Odin's second son, was handsome, graceful, and wise, shining like the sun. Everything was going perfectly for him until he started having nightmares. In his nightmares, he saw the end of the realms, the sun and the moon being devoured by a wolf, brother slaughtering brother, pain and death everywhere. When he told his nightmares to the gods, they too could not make sense of them and were worried. Only Loki was smiling. Odin set out like a traveler to seek answers to these nightmares. He was told of a wise woman, an oracle in the land of the dead. He went to Hel, the land of the dead, resurrected the woman, and asked her to tell him news from the land of the dead. She said, "Balder is coming to us. The realm of the dead will rejoice, and despair will reign in the realm above." This woman was Loki's giant wife, Angerboda, and she knew what would happen. Odin then told his wife Frigg about his son Balder's nightmares and said that Balder was in danger. Frigg did not believe them. She did not believe that anything could harm her son Balder. Then he traveled the earth and took promises from everything. Fire would not burn, water would not drown, iron would not cut, stone would not rot, plants and animals would never harm Balder. Frigg summoned diseases and made them promise not to make her son sick. Frigg, who spoke to everything, didn't speak only to mistletoe. She saw it as an unimportant plant and ignored it. Then she returned confidently to Asgard. She took promises from everything and everyone not to harm her son. Balder couldn't believe that nothing could hurt him. He tested himself to believe. No fire could burn him, no sword could cut him, and nothing could harm him. Indeed, his mother had promised everything for him. Loki did not like this. Then a young woman approached Frigg. She asked him if he'd skipped anything. Frigg replied that he had skipped mistletoe, which he considered unimportant and harmless. The young woman left in the middle of the conversation. This woman was Loki in disguise. Loki then went to the oak trees in Valhalla. Mistletoe was growing on the tree. He thought about making a poisonous concoction from it, or how he could use it differently. Balder and Thor had other brothers. One of them was Hod, and he was blind. Balder took care of Hod the most. Everyone was having a good time, happy that no harm would come to Balder. That day, Balder could not take care of his brother Hod. Hod was trying to figure out what was going on. Loki took advantage of this situation by going to Hod. He put a small wooden arrow in Hod's hand. Then he took him to Balder and told him to throw it at him. In this way, he said, the gods would laugh at this, and he would have accompanied Balder on this happy day. Then Hod threw the arrow toward his brother Balder, and suddenly the laughter gave way to sadness. Hod couldn't see, so he couldn't understand what was happening. Then his mother started crying, and Hod realized that he had killed his brother. The arrow Loki had given him was made of mistletoe, and it was the only thing that could kill Balder. The gods could not understand what Hod had done. Then they thought of going to Hel, the land of the dead, and bringing Balder back. Odin sent another son, Hermod, to go to Hel. Balder's funeral was held. All the gods, giants, and even dwarves attended the funeral. When Balder's wife Nanna saw the funeral, she died of heartbreak, and they put her on the ship next to Balder. Then the ship was burned, and the bodies of Balder and his wife were commemorated. Now, the gods' only hope was that Hermod could bring Balder back from the land of the dead. Hermod rode his horse deep into the land of the dead. Here, he first came across a bridge. A woman was waiting on the bridge, and he asked her where Balder was. She told him to continue downwards, and that he would meet Hel's gate. Hermod did so. He traveled on for a while, and came across Hel's gate, which was as high as the trees. But no living creature had ever passed behind the gate. Hermod rode fast and jumped over the gate. Here he found a great hall. In the hall sat his brother Balder and his wife Nanna. Balder, who normally shone like the sun, looked very pale here. Also in the hall was Hel, the ruler of the land of the dead. Hermod told Hel that he was coming to get his brother, Balder, that everyone felt sorry for him and that Odin wanted it. Hel said that no one who came to the land of the dead would ever return, but he gave Hermod a condition. If everyone was crying for Balder, he would give him back, but if not a single person felt sorry for him, Balder would stay in the land of the dead. Hermod immediately returned to Asgard and reported the situation to Odin. Odin then sent messengers to all the lands. The messengers asked everything in their path if they felt sorry for Balder. Women, men, animals, plants, even stone and earth wept. The messengers were happy that everything was sad for Balder. Then they rested near a cave. An old giant came out of the cave, and they asked him to, "Do you feel sorry for Balder?" The old giant spat on the ground and said he did not feel sorry for Balder. He was happy. Then he disappeared into the darkness of the cave. Later, the messengers returned to Asgard. They told the gods that everything felt sorry for Balder, but only one old giant did not. Thor now realized everything. Loki was responsible for all this. He was in disguise again and had caused everything from Balder's death to his stay in the land of the dead. Thor looked everywhere for Loki afterward, but he couldn't find him. Loki was in hiding and waiting for things to calm down. And the end of everything is Ragnarok. Everything will end and begin once again. Heimdall, the all-seeing Heimdall, will see Ragnarok when all the gods are asleep, but he will have no power to prevent what he sees. The end will begin with a winter. Winter will follow winter. Spring will never come. People will be cold, hungry, and angry. Great wars will be fought in all lands. Brothers will fight brothers, fathers will kill their sons, and people will hunt each other. After the deaths, very few people will survive. The sun in the sky will disappear, the moon will not be seen, and the stars will disappear. Darkness will cover everything. Snow will fall, winds will blow, and it will be colder than cold. Then the time of great earthquakes will come. Mountains will shake and crumble. Floods will also occur. The seas will rise and fall. Fenrir, son of Loki, the great wolf, will free himself from his chains. His mouth will open, his upper jaw will touch the sky, and his lower jaw will touch the earth. There will be nothing he cannot destroy. Jormungandr, the other son of Loki, the gigantic serpent, will pour poison from his fangs into the sea, so that there will be no life left in the sea. He will spray his poison into the air and kill all the seabirds. Everyone who comes in contact with Fenrir, the wolf, and Jormungandr the serpent will taste death. This is how the end will begin. Then the sky will split open, and Surtur, the fire giant with his flaming sword, and his sons will enter Asgard. They will walk across the rainbow bridge and destroy the Bifrost. Then Loki will break free from his captivity and becomes the helmsman of a ship called Naglfar. He will gather all the giants on this ship. The giants, the dead, Loki and his children, and Surtur and his sons will all go to the Vigrid battlefield. Heimdall will see all this then and blow the horn of Mimir, the Gjallarhorn, with all his might. All the gods will be awakened by the noise. They will all reach for their weapons and meet at the well under the World Tree. Odin will go to Mimir's head for advice, and Mimir will whisper something to Odin. These whispers will give Odin hope. Odin will lead the gods, Thor will be with them, and together they will go to the battlefield. With everyone on the battlefield, the final battle will begin. Odin will attack Fenrir, the wolf, with his spear. Thor will ride his goats, hammer in hand, towards the serpent Jormungandr. Frey will move against the flaming Surtur. He will be the first casualty of the Aesir. He will be no match for Surtur's flaming sword. The battle will rage, and Odin's warriors will clash with Loki's warriors. Garm, the Hellhound, will meet Tyr. Tyr will try to stop him, but Garm's teeth will clamp around Tyr's throat, and they will both die. Thor will go to the serpent, and with his hammer he will split Jormungandr's head open and blow his brains out. The snake's head will separate from its body, and the poison will gush out when it falls to the ground. The gush of poison will fall on Thor, and he will die in agony from the poison of the snake he slaughtered. and Odin will fight Fenrir. The wolf will catch him and swallow him. Later, Odin will die. His son Vidar will watch his father die. Then, Vidar will pin the wolf's lower jaw with one foot and prevent it from moving. Then he will reach for the upper jaw and tear the wolf's entire mouth off, and avenge the death of his father, Odin. Almost everyone on both sides will die. Only Loki and Heimdall will appear on the battlefield. Then, they will walk towards each other over the corpses. Loki will say that Heimdall is too late to wake the gods, but Heimdall will not respond in cold blood. They will attack each other, fight, cut, and stab each other. Both will fall side by side with fatal wounds and die together. Loki will say one last word to Heimdall: "I have won." Heimdall will say, "I see more than you see. Odin's son Vidar, Vali, Thor's children Magni and Modi are still alive. They are also noble enough to wield Thor's hammer Mjolnir." This time, Loki will continue, "I have killed all of humanity. I have won." Heimdall will say, "Surtur's sword cannot penetrate the World Tree," and two humans hid themselves in the trunk of the World Tree. The descendants of these two people will populate the world again. This is the beginning of everything again, and they will die. Surtur will rise above the dead, and everything will catch fire. Even the air will burn, and ash will cover the earth. Later, the seas will rise and wash the ashes from the earth. Everything that has happened will be forgotten under the sunless sky. As the seas wash away the ashes, the green world will reappear. Even though the sun has disappeared, the sun's daughter will shine again where her mother was. The last two survivors will emerge from the World Tree, and humanity will multiply again. Asgard will no longer exist, but Idavol will be in its place, the gods' meeting place. The sons of Odin and Thor will now meet here. Balder and Hod will join them from the land of the dead. Finally, they will all remember the gods who died at Idavol, and Ragnarok will be over. Remember to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to watch more documentaries of legendary world mythologies and to be notified when new documentaries are released.